Okay, so I'm Marshall Breeding. I'm the, among other roles, the executive director of the Vanderbilt Television News Archive, and we're delighted to be able to provide, though at a cost, some of the footage to support your research, Deborah. So, give you a little bit of an understanding of Vanderbilt Television News Archive and the challenges that we face. So we hit the record button on August 5th, 1968, and we doesn't include me. It was before my time. I was in grade school, I think, or later. But it was, so there's this fellow, Paul Simpson, who showed in the picture. He's the one in the corner. He was a conservative fellow, a businessman, he worked in the insurance industry and a news buff. And he kind of had this idea that news had a slant to it. And so in one of his visits to New York City, he wanted to go to the networks and they said, I want to show me this clip again. I want to see that. And they said, we can't do that because we reuse the tapes. So he felt then the urgency of recording television news and creating libraries of television news. He thought in the same way that you can go to a library and read yesterday's newspapers, you should be able to go to a library and see the news from a previous day. So he shopped that idea around. Eventually, Vanderbilt was willing to do it as a 3-month experiment. You see the equipment there, this 1-inch tape, an hour of it costs about $40 in 1968 dollars. So it was not an inexpensive venture. And it was technically difficult, a lot harder than it is today. So needless to say, it kind of survived past its 3 months and has become a perpetual activity at Vanderbilt University and resides in the library. So, it is kind of one of the prominent archives that we have in our library, something that we're very kind of proud to have done and to contribute to the world. It's a historical accident. We don't really have a big journalism department. So, it really is kind of a historical accident that this archive, is sprouted up at Vanderbilt. But, it has some unique qualities. It's always hard to know how to qualify it, so you can say you're the most unique this or that. But we think that we're the largest, most comprehensive archive of U.S. national news broadcasts available to the general public. So it's a large amount of unique material. We have material that doesn't exist in the networks, for example. Networks borrow material from us when they don't have it. All of our material is kind of captured off the air, in earlier days through old-fashioned television antennas. So, sometimes our copy is a little bit dirty, but it exists. And the cleanness of the quality, isn't the biggest deal when it comes to preserving the content. So, back when there were 3 networks that people relied on the news, we have all 3 of those. Altogether, I think we have about 50,000 hours. We don't do 24 hours a day, so it's taken us this 42 or 3 years to accumulate 50,000 hours of content. But it's still a lot of content when it comes to all of the technical things you have to do to preserve it and provide access and especially describe it. The one thing that's most expensive by far in our operation is describing the news so that people can find it in our collection. So ABC, CBS, and NBC we began doing on this magic date of August 5th, 1968. They started trying to do CNN earlier, episodically in 1985, more systematically since 1996, but an hour a day. That's kind of our capacity, is to be able to record and describe an hour a day off of any given network. Added Fox News in 2004. But there are, so regular newscasts plus specials, when something extraordinary happens, we want to make sure that we capture that. We have a specials collection that essentially follows the coverage of the president, the sitting president. So speeches, State of the Union, news conferences, all those kinds of things exist in our collection. And when really big things happen, we go into 24-hour mode. So for the events listed here, we have kind of continuous coverage of those events, as long as we can do it. So for September 11th, we started doing 24 hours a day on the stations that we cover, and have those in our collection. They're not well described, but they exist. the controversial election of 2004. We have a lot of coverage of that. So, specials and regular evening newscasts. Our mission is to capture it. That's the important thing, because unless you do time travel, you can't go back and get it again. We want to preserve it so that the copies we keep, we make sure are preserved for posterity. And then we want to provide access to it. So we have different ways of doing that. First is through our database of news. We have folks who write abstracts about all the different news stories. We're not quite to 1 million records that describe the news in our database. So we have, 3 people on our staff who kind of watch the news and write abstracts of it. And they're the people. If you want to know something that happened, ask them. They spend their whole days doing that. So we have different ways to be able to search that database. So to be able to at least know what exists is an important thing. And a lot of folks use our database just as a news source in itself, even if they don't get access to any of the video. One of the things that we are able to do is loan copies of the news to anyone who asks, though for a fee. And that's been a service of the archive from the very beginning, where they would compile tapes of material requested by a researcher and mail it to them, and they would mail it back. So originally it was the 1-inch tapes, the pneumatic, VHS, and now DVD. So that has been a constant service, is to be able to loan material to researchers in the same way that libraries do. We don't care what you're using it for. We don't care who you are. If you make a request and pay the fee, we'll be able to loan it to you. So this is only for viewing and research, I would have to say. We don't own the copyright of any of this material, so we can't authorize anyone to reuse it. Of course, they'll have to talk to their, the rights holders or someone to advise them whether or not it's fair use. So our collection is now in digital form. We have taken all of the 1-inch tapes and in the 70s converted them to 3/4 pneumatic, and then converted all of those in the 2004-6 time frame to MPEGs. So everything in our collection, with tiny little exceptions, now exists as digital files. So we have at least more technical means to provide access to it. So there are reasons why we can't just stream it to the world, but one of the things that we've been able to do is to set up institutional subscriptions. The folks that are eligible are colleges and universities, United States and Canada. So again, for a fee, we'll allow IP authenticated access to not just the database, but to selected video. And now that includes NBC and CNN. So, you do have the ability to search, click, and view if you're at the, associated with the right institution and so forth. And you can come on site to look at anything that you want. We can stream to ourselves, in other words, without getting into trouble. So, we offer on-site viewing, and a lot of kind of serious researchers, it's worth their time to come and visit us to be able to peruse, the entire collection going back to '68 on the topic of interest. We're partnered with Library of Congress, so at the Library of Congress you can do that same kind of viewing of our collection. So, we have been funded to do that by our wonderful friends at the National Endowment of Humanities and National Science Foundation. We have a clause of the copyright law kind of named for us, Section 108F3, the Vanderbilt Clause, that essentially instantiates into law what we do, which is lending of physical medias of news as a circulation, as a loan. We don't think that applies to streaming, so that's why we have the restrictions of that. We don't claim use, ownership of our content. It's very tricky for an archive not to own its content. But, it's important stuff. If we don't, a lot of this stuff that, we saved, we, have to keep for long term. So we partner with the Library of Congress so that our content also gets ingested into their kind of world-class digital preservation facilities. So how is the collection used? I mean, that's kind of the question of the day. So, because of the loans that we give and so forth, we observe that, this kind of material is used in really kind of amazing and important ways. The kinds of content analysis that Deborah from Boston University talked about are very typical, where a researcher given on a particular topic will want to look at a large amount of material, kind of code it up and be able to scientifically describe the coverage of this or that event. There's something called the Brownout Report, where there's an organization that looks to see how Hispanics use our collection. Have been covered in the news. I want to kind of wrap up, since my time is up, by talking about how September 11th collection is used. It is kind of the most requested part of our collection. We don't necessarily watch the how it's viewed in streaming as much as we do the loans that we make, but this is kind of by far the material lately that's been requested most since the event. So the same kind of things, these qualitative kind of studies. There's been lots of papers written that reference our collection, psychoanalytical. I looked at one the other day, psychoanalytical analysis, terrorism, and I can't even say it, apocalyptic violence. And so forth. Requests for filmmakers, kind of as screeners, again, whether they use it under fair use, they have to work out with their folks. And then a lot of the alternative interpretations, those folks want to look at our material to be able to prove or disprove this or that theory. So, this is amazingly important material, and we're glad to be at least another archive that's interested in saving and providing access to this material. So thank you.